Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Existential Crisis Hotline. And I'm your host, Cameron Cope. And today, I've got some really cool stuff to share. Last night's stream, we talked about, I think we were watching a bunch of different stuff, but I think the last thing we left with, sorry, I'm just adjusting my mic here. The last thing we left off with was watching Jordan Peterson on Jubilee. And it was really interesting because I was mowing the grass on the property today, just listening to some things. And this video, which we're going to go through a little bit today, amongst some other things, came up. And it was Alex O'Connor, and it says, Deconstructing Jordan Peterson on Religion. And it's so fascinating because I just realized my screen is like, this does not make sense what I have going on here. Let me do that. And that. I think that looks better. I don't know why it's so small. Anyways, there we go. That's why it's doing that. I was watching this video, and it's funny because a lot of the stuff I was saying last night from observing him debating atheists on Jubilee, Alex O'Connor was saying a lot of the same stuff about Jordan Peterson being very slippery on religion. And I put up a reel on X real quick before I started, or on Instagram rather, basically saying, do you think that God is just a fictional character that represents sort of like the ideal perfection of what humanity could strive for or be? Or is God actually like a being that exists? Where's my thing? Sorry, I didn't prepare this. There you go. Is God a being that exists somewhere that does things in our reality and in our lives? Or is God just the ground of all being, that which causes everything to exist? Which was what that bishop argued on last night's stream that we were watching. And as I was watching, not just this video that we're going to go through, but also another one I have, and I have a few things lined up. I was watching this guy named Douglas Rushkoff, who I guess I'd heard that name before. Maybe it just sounds familiar, but he had a really good take on religion. I think he's ethnically Jewish. I don't know if he's religiously Jewish per se, but I would assume not based on the way he talked. But he had some really cool points that really also tied back into the stream we did, the first one I did on Thomas Jefferson, 1776, the founding of America. Was it really founded as a Christian nation? And we saw a lot of stuff that pushed back against that idea. But Thomas Jefferson had these really cool points of saying, like, his understanding of the story of Jesus was not that Jesus was claiming to be God, but that he went into he was born into the Jewish world of Judaism, and he was basically offering another perspective of what God could be, and therefore what humans could emulate. The Old Testament Yahweh version of God was very ruthless and very vindictive, arbitrary. He had a lot of laws and rules that you had to follow. And it became a point where the priests at the time basically kind of controlled the population through, they were the best ones at following the laws. Jesus comes along and says God could be something more than that. God could also be love and compassion and all these other things. But then I think that was twisted by the system, which can mean a lot of different government people throughout time, twisted that message and turned Jesus into a mythical figure that was God on earth and would die for your sins and basically allow you access into heaven in the afterlife, even though you technically don't deserve it. So I've been looking more at these points because I really want to support people especially those who are looking for purpose, looking for what is the meaning? Why am I here? What is the point of all of this? And I noticed online there's a lot of people going through this right now. I already went through this when I was in my 20s. And fortunately, I was able to see, through support of other people, a very clear, direct answer as to why the world is the way it is, and what is the answer, what is the what is the part that each of us play in creating a world that we would actually like to be in, that we would, if we were in the shoes of anybody else, that we would be okay with that. And so so with that in mind, I have a few things to go over. Shout out, hey Owen, I see you in the chat with your, I don't know what that character is. It's like a green slime ball ghost. I don't know. I guess that's just the chat theme. But that's kind of funny. Hey Owen, if anybody else is there, hello, welcome. If you're watching this on the upload later on YouTube or Rumble, hello. But I'm going to be going through a few things today, and what I want to attempt to establish and support you to see is that what people are searching for in the concept of God could actually be much more relevant to our life if we can shift our perspective a little bit. And that's going to involve some shifting of how we see our responsibility to reality and how we see who we actually are in relation to reality. And maybe I'll get into some of that later, obviously. But really, these live streams I'm doing are sort of building a picture. It's not that it's necessarily building up to a certain point, because I'm really saying the same thing in all of these, just in different ways with different examples and so forth. But I think if you were to, really look at all the points that are being brought through here, and also look at some of the resources that I talk about, it'll support you to expand the way you think about yourself in relation to this world, this reality that you're in. It really will answer all of your questions. Why am I here? What happens when I die? Is heaven real? Could heaven exist here on earth? All of those, the real existential questions. And, I have fun doing this. Hey, Sandro. Hey, Gaitan. Just checking. I'm seeing someone's texting me. Okay. It's Mitch texting me about the podcast. We also do a podcast on X at Be Self-Perfected on the it's the Self-Perfected X account. We do it live on X because we kind of say whatever we want on there. And so check that out. We do that every Sunday at 9:15 a.m. Central Time. And it usually goes for a few hours. And we talk about, basically, it's like our place to talk about what happened that past week in the world, online. It's fun. We joke around, but we also talk about serious stuff too. So if you like what I'm saying here, you'll really like the podcast, because it's not just me, it's two other guys too, Mitch and Drake, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, so that being said, I think, thank you, Gaitan. I agree, and I'm definitely not biased. I think what I'm going to do is start with... No, I think I'll start with the Jordan Peterson. I feel like this video here... Oh, you can't see what I'm doing. This video here with Doug Rushkoff is really good, but I think he goes a little bit beyond. And I just want to start with this Jordan Peterson it's a deconstruction of Jordan Peterson on religion. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I don't know exactly when I'm going to stop, but it'll be obvious to me because it's kind of the first bit that's really relevant. And I think it's really this section, what is God, and maybe some of this too. Some of the other stuff is really fascinating, and I really agree with a lot of the stuff that Alex O'Connor was saying in here, but it's not so relevant to what I want to talk about tonight. So, but if you were watching the live stream last night, or you've seen it on the replay, you're going to see a lot of the stuff he was saying was pretty much what I was trying to say in the last one. But he says it with a British accent, so maybe it'll be a little bit more clear. But obviously I'll pause and give some comments and stuff here and there. But I'm going to play through some of this, and then we're going to go on to some other things. So welcome, everybody, and enjoy. Let me start this one. And if you can't hear it, as soon as I start playing, just let me know in the chat, okay? Also, if you give me like a thumbs up or let me know, is this audio good? Like, you guys can hear me okay? I mean, I can see my levels. It looks okay, but I can't hear myself. Okay.
Titled the 10th chapter of his 12 rules. For a man who titled the 10th chapter of his 12 rules for life, Be Precise in Your Speech, Jordan Peterson seems ludicrously uninterested in his own advice anytime he's speaking on the topic of religion or belief in God. Now, granted, these aren't exactly the most straightforward areas of study known to man, so I wouldn't expect his views to be without detail and clarification. But in my view, Peterson tends to needlessly overcomplicate any question he has ever asked about God or religion to an extent that borders on the comic.
So people say to me, do you believe in God? And I think, okay, there's a couple of mysteries in that question. What do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God? And you say as the questioner, well, we already know what all those things mean, except belief in God. And I think, no, if we're going to get down to the fundamental brass tacks, we don't really know what any of those things mean.
So I want to take a moment to explain why, after having listened carefully to a great deal of...
So if you were on the stream last night or you watched it, that's kind of what I was trying to argue. It also makes sense why the conversations didn't really go anywhere when he was arguing with the atheists, because he's not really defining anything very clearly, and he's basically setting it up that you can't even really talk about it because you have to define so many basic words that we assume, and it really just makes it this like thing you can't really wrap your mind around or even have a conversation about. But he's going to break it down really well.
His recent material on religion, and even going to see him talk about it in person, my takeaway is this: Jordan Peterson is what most people would call an atheist. He thinks that God is a fictional character, that the stories of religious scripture did not literally occur, and that the idea of God and stories about him are primarily a way for people to ground their value structures and provide social and psychological unity. Now, I do realize that Dr. Peterson himself would probably not be best pleased with that characterization I've just given of him as an atheist, so allow me to take some time to defend that claim. Fair warning, it's going to get a bit wordy and complicated, but stick with me. I might be wrong, but I've tried my best to offer an account of what it is that Jordan Peterson actually thinks, before then offering some criticism. Of course, if I do get it wrong, then Dr. Peterson, you're always welcome on.
So I was kind of trying to make this argument on the last stream, basically, that he's actually an atheist. He doesn't actually take any of these points literally, and yet, for some reason, and Alex never really, I don't recall in his video, gets into this particular point, which is, it seems like he either doesn't want to offend Christians, or he wants to stay in their good graces and kind of like fits himself into it, so he never contradicts them. And it also goes into the point that we talked about last night as well, like with that bishop, for example, where he was talking about God is not a being the way he's not even in the genus of being. He is the very ground of being. He is the to be of to be. We looked at St. Thomas Aquinas and his arguments, and we looked at some of it anyways. But but that's not what the average person actually, the average Christian out there actually sees God as a being that they look up to, that they don't want to piss off, that they want to please, that they love, that they feel loves them, they have a relationship with. They don't see it in that deep philosophical way, most people. And what I would say is that that's because if you're above a certain level of intelligence, I suppose, but you're also not emotional about God. Let's say you're non-emotional about it, and you're in a certain position in our system, it is you realize that idea of God makes no sense. Like that it's a superhero out there. Like you might as well just believe in the Greek gods. It's kind of like an idealist form of the Greek gods. Like they're just beings that have superpowers, basically. It's like the idealized version of Zeus or Jupiter. And I think most people in the system that are in positions of real responsibility in our world see through that. They don't believe that's what it is. They might not really fully question God completely, but they see it at a much deeper level than just the fairy tale fictional version of God. But it's very useful in a position in the system where you're benefiting tremendously from the system, but you need a lot of well, I was going to say slaves, might as well just say it. Like if you need a lot of slaves, it's useful for them to believe in a God that is a being out there. And it's very similar to the point of Santa Claus. Like when you're a parent, now we didn't do this with our kids. They know what Santa Claus is. They understand the story of it. But a lot of parents, they essentially brainwash their kids to believe that Santa Claus is a real, actual being that exists out there somewhere, well, in the North Pole. And he delivers the presents. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows the story. And then part of it is you have to be a good boy or a good girl, because otherwise Santa won't give you your presents. So it's a very useful tool as a parent, if you can get the child to believe it, to then kind of control their behavior. So that's really how I see what most people's conception of God is it's that. And what's funny is with Jordan Peterson, he, in that Jubilee debate we were watching, he was acting like that's what atheists believe. That's the God they hate. And they just hate this fictional superhero version, which is not what God is. You don't even know what you're rejecting. God is so much more than that, right? So my point was Jordan Peterson was there to debate atheists about Christianity. So they were kind of arguing against that version. And it's like he was boiling down or distilling an atheist to be somebody who's rejecting simply that fairy tale version of God, and it doesn't really understand they're actually rejecting so much more, the infinite, the highest form of value, all these more abstract things, which he's going to talk about in here. But I just wanted to make that point briefly, that most people actually believe that God is basically a Santa Claus type figure, right? That is a fact. Go talk to people. You'll see this for yourself, right? Now, seeing it as something more than that, I think really doesn't get you much further. You can still have a world like we have where there's lots of war and suffering and poverty, and even believing in this more transcendent version of God doesn't really solve that problem, even though it's claimed that that's the only way to solve it. But I'll talk more about that in a bit. I'm going to go back to the video now. And thanks for letting me know about the video, guys. Okay. I'm also kind of pausing a bunch because I don't want to just play the video straight through. I don't know if that's a copyright issue. So I think it's generally okay. They allow you to do this kind of stuff, but that's also kind of why I'm pausing a lot.
My podcast. To begin with, we have to start with a fundamental question. To Jordan Peterson, real or not, what is God? But just before jumping into that, a word from today's...
So I'm not going to learn about the sponsor, but today's sponsor is the Existential Crisis Hotline, brought to you by me. Okay.
So, back to it. To Jordan Peterson, what is God? To begin answering this, we need to understand Peterson's views about value. For Jordan Peterson, our ability to do just about anything requires a belief in some set of value judgments. For example, even being able to do something as simple as looking at this glass, simply seeing a cup, requires the assumption of value judgments. And there are two reasons for this. The first is expressed here by Jonathan Pageau, who appears to have had a huge impact on Peterson's thinking.
We can't perceive an is without a hierarchy of attention and without a hierarchy of perception, because the world is indefinite in detail and in quantity. And so for even to be able to say this, to point to something, to say that, is already in this hierarchy of something we could call vertical causation.
So, first, there are a near infinite number of ways that we can see the world. We could look in all different directions, focus on multiple things. We can see things as parts or as wholes. And so to focus on one object at first requires an attention hierarchy.
The hierarchy of attention.
What's worth looking at? What do we value focusing on? But it goes even deeper. For Peterson, the very ability to even identify a cup as a distinguishable object requires a belief in certain values. If I put this cup on a table, why do I still see the cup and the table as two distinct objects? Why don't I perceive them as one big, weirdly shaped object? And why don't I see this cup as multiple objects? The side, the bottom, the rim. Why do I see it as one unified object when there are so many different ways that we could look at it? Well, here's what Dr. Peterson...
I'm going to give my perspective on the answer to that question, but I want you to hear Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Pageau's explanation first.
has to say.
If you were a photorealist painter, you could spend a month painting all the reflections on that glass. It's a very complex thing to perceive, but you perceive it as a unity, and we know this neuropsychologically, we know this scientifically. You perceive it as a unity because you can grip it, and because you can raise it to your lips, and because you can drink it, and because you need to drink water to survive, and you are willing to drink water to survive because you believe emotionally and motivationally and perhaps rationally that survival is a good, and that's dependent on your belief that human existence in some sense is a good, and that it's striving towards some sort of higher unified order. And you might think, well, you don't need all that to perceive the glass. And the answer is, yeah, as a matter of fact, you need all of that to perceive the glass.
So the reason my brain perceives this cup as a single object is functional. It's because I can use this cup to drink things. And the reason I see it like that is because I want to drink things, because drinking things is necessary to my survival. And so I must, in some sense, value my survival in order to see the cup. So in order to perceive the world around us, according to Peterson, and objects within it, we need to believe in a hierarchy of values. But we don't just need to believe in this value hierarchy to see anything, we also need it in order to do anything. Here, Peterson gives the example of writing an essay.
I used to ask my students, why are you writing this essay? And that's a variation of the question, why do anything? But
I want to know why they're sitting so close together on that giant couch.
let's make it concrete. Why are you writing this essay? Well, so that I can get a grade for the class. Why are you taking the class? So that I can finish my year at university. Why are you finishing your year at university and motivated to do that? To get my degree. Why do you want the degree? And then that's a whole hierarchy of value that is definitely governing, either in an integrated manner or a disintegrated manner, the actions of the person who's writing the essay.
So this is a little bit
maybe I'm going to let him finish first, but I have some comments on that.
more straightforward. Whenever we do anything, someone can ask, why are you doing that? Why am I making this video right now? Well, so I can share my views with you. And why do I want to share my views with you? Or to contribute to a meaningful conversation. Well, why do I want to do that? Because I value such meaning, and so on and so.
Is he being honest about why he's doing it? Actually?
Forth. And this can go on up this hierarchy of things that I value until we get to the very top, the thing that we value most of all.
Which is what? All right. Hey, Daniel. What is the thing that we value most?
Upon which everything else is predicated. Okay, so in order to see anything or do anything, we must be motivated by some hierarchy of values.
So I'll just say quickly on that. We can see things because it's in our vocabulary. That's what a vocabulary is. Like you were told that that's a cup, right? You might have been told that's a glass. You might actually know what kind of a glass that is. I'm sure there is a particular style of glass that is. You know, the material itself, you might know what the material is. You might know the chemical composition of the glass that it's made from. But that's all just vocabulary, like that you're programmed with. You don't have that when you're born. But the real question is, when you're learning vocabulary, it's in the context of a system where everybody values one thing above all things. And it's not what they're going to say it is, right? So I'm going to let him finish here.
So here's an important question. What is at the top of that value hierarchy? What is the fundamental value upon which everything else is based? Here's where it gets really interesting.
And you might say, well, how hard are you going to try when you write this essay? And the answer to that would be, well, it depends on how well integrated my view of the ethic is all the way up to the highest place. And then we could say, well, the highest place is the divine place, and we could make that a matter of definition.
There it is. Did you catch that? It was so quick that you'd miss it if you blinked. But Jordan Peterson just told us what God is in his view. Listen again.
And then we could say, well, the highest place is the divine place, and we could make that a matter of definition.
The highest place, that is the highest place on this value hierarchy that we were just talking about, is the divine place, and we can make that a matter of definition. Wow. The word divine, of course, means of or relating to God. And Peterson has just told us that for him it's a simple matter of definition that the divine is just whatever value is at the highest place on the value hierarchy. So let's go back to that essay.
So I think that's actually very telling, because basically Peterson is saying, like in the context of writing the essays, well, why am I writing this essay? Because I want to get a good grade. Well, why do you want to get a good grade? Because I want to get my degree. But if you actually were honest within it, not just bullshitting yourself about why you're doing it, you're writing the fucking essay because you want to get your degree, because you want to get a job so you can have money, so you can live in this world and have a certain lifestyle that you have been programmed to believe is what you find acceptable. That's all it is. And you might say, oh, some people go beyond that and they have a higher value than just money. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Let me see. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We talked about this the other day. You've got physiological needs, and then above that, and so the whole idea with the hierarchy of needs is you can't really fulfill the ones above until you have the ones at the bottom met. So you have these physiological needs: air, water, food, shelter, etc. Safety needs: personal security, employment, resources, health, property. Love and belonging, esteem, respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, self-actualization, desire to become the most that one can be. But if you read, like, there's a really great book by Colin Wilson about Maslow. Let me see if I can find it. Colin Wilson Maslow. He wrote a book about him. Yeah, this one. New Pathways in Psychology. Maslow and the Post-Freudian Revolution. It's really good. And Colin Wilson was super obsessed about peak experiences. That was his whole deal. Super consciousness, as he called it. But basically, that's what it is. And Jordan Peterson even said it in that Julie debate that we were watching last time. It's about that peak experience. And that's what getting close to the divine is, that peak experience. So even though someone might not call it money, it's still experience. And in our world, to have peak experiences requires money, right? Oh, that just reminds me of something. Let me find this real quick. Brian Johnson, DMT. This guy, Brian Johnson, who's the he's a billionaire. He's the guy, he bought Venmo and sold Venmo for like billions of dollars. And now he's the guy who's like trying to live forever, or trying to figure out how to live forever. So he did DMT recently. I'm just going to play a little bit of this because I watched this earlier. And listen to what he says when he comes off the DMT. Actually, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted where he actually talks about it himself. Brian, I put Johnson. Come on. Brian Johnson. He had a tweet about it. Here it is. So he did the DMT. And maybe I'll just play what he says when he wakes up. Let me go back real quick. So he smokes this DMT.
Our exist and the in the
Then as soon as he kind of wakes up,
sanity that we are conscious on this planet, in this universe, is unimaginable. And the preciousness of our existence is unfathomable. It feels like doing anything other than securing our own existence is ridiculous. Why would we do anything other than secure our existence?
so that's an interesting statement. Why would we do anything other than cure existence, or secure our own existence? You could take that one of two ways. You could take that in a sort of self-interested way, or you can look at it as he's maybe realized at some level we're alive, we're here. Why would we want to do anything that would jeopardize that? Well, I agree, but then you really have to take it all the way to really understand all the ways in which we are actually jeopardizing that, right? And as you watch these streams, as we go further and further, not maybe only in this stream, but as we go, that's what I want to show is like, we are jeopardizing our existence. You're jeopardizing your own existence, in fact, if you don't realize, accept, and apply the principle of what's best for all. Because if you're not doing what's best for all, you're jeopardizing your existence, because your existence is tied fundamentally to all of existence, all of reality. So you can't harm any part of reality without harming yourself. You can seemingly get away with it temporarily, but there's always a consequence that reverberates out, that ripples out, that will come back to you. This is why everyone's afraid of death. That's a consequence of not considering what's best for all. So that was interesting, but I want to play, or not play, but look at that tweet he wrote. So this was what he wrote after he got off the DMT. And let's see, where is it? Let's see. We can't grok the preciousness of our existence, pledging allegiance to existence, becoming a warrior and caretaker of life on earth to protect at any cost the candle of consciousness that has miraculously emerged in this part of the galaxy. But I'm telling you, all that's going to happen with this is this experience he had is going to be warped into, I really don't want to die. It's like he's just telling himself in a much more profound way. He's created an experience within himself now that's like, man, you really don't want to die. Okay, that's fine. That's like half of the realization. Don't die. But now, how do we actually become a warrior and a caretaker of life on earth, right? And there was another tweet he had. I think it was this one. Awoke this morning, feeling a childlike vibe of life, bubbling excitement for what the day holds, novelty in the smallest of things, unburdened by the clouds of worry that dim an adult's life, possibility painting the horizon. Those are all really nice things. Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. Awoke this morning feeling a childlike vibe, bubbling excitement for what the day holds, novelty in the smallest of things, unburdened by the clouds of worry that dim an adult's life, possibility painting the horizon. And I made a comment because I'm like, yeah, that's what an equal money system would be like for everybody. Like, you would wake up and you'd be like, what can I create? Because I don't have to worry about fucking surviving. So imagine you do DMT and you're also a billionaire. You wake up the next day. Oh, the possibilities are endless. Versus you wake up and you don't have a home, you're poor, you don't have any resources. Like, you're basically on the losing side of the system. So it doesn't really mean anything unless we realize we have to give that to everybody. And the way we give it to everybody is not by having everyone do DMT, because you could do DMT, but it's not going to change how our system functions. And it's certainly not going to change the fact that even if everybody wanted it that way, if we still allow some people to be in a position where they run the system in a way that's based on debt, where no one ever actually can make it in the system, unless that system changes, this is just going to be a temporary feeling. And it may not be for him. He may be able to sustain that feeling, but he's a billionaire, right? And what did he have to participate in to get to that position where he can have an experience like this and then get up the next day and not really have to worry too much about where's he going to get his next meal from? Because there's many people on this planet that do have to worry about that. So I wanted to show this in the context of this, because you see, it's just like a peak experience, just an experience you have. So whether you want to call it money or going beyond that, peak experience, the bliss experience, right? For example, David Hawkins, map of consciousness. I'm sure many of you have seen this, right? Well, it's not loading. Here we go. Let's see. Well, it didn't show me the picture. See if I can find one that actually gives me the picture. I don't know why it's not giving me the picture. Maybe I'll just zoom in a little bit over here. I don't know if you guys can see that. There we go. See, at the bottom, well, you're only seeing half of it, though. This is the positive stuff, right? On the negative, it's like anger, depression, sadness, apathy, blah, blah, blah. But if you go higher and higher, look, it's the energetic log. Oops, I don't know what's going on there. It's all just energy that you're feeling. What is going on with this thing? Okay. Sorry, I don't know how to use this. Maybe I'll just click images. Maybe that's easier. Still not making it big. Well, anyways, I'll just tell you what it says. Like, as you go higher up this energy scale, you get to bliss, and then the ineffable, which is beyond, it's just above that. Like that perfect peak experience of like total unfathomable, just divine, whatever that there's not even a word for it, because there's bliss, which we can kind of relate to, like complete pure bliss, and then beyond that, you just can't even describe how amazing it is. So that's God, actually, to Jordan Peterson. And for many people, like, money is the barrier to that experience, right? If we had a money system that supported everybody effectively, what I'm suggesting is that experience of yourself would be like your basic state of existence. And I mean, it kind of proves it right here, doesn't it? Right? How many people do not have their own physiological needs met on a regular basis, consistently, predictably, and their safety needs? And then you look at the way our system is moving and is structured, where we've brainwashed a lot of people that you don't need to be in relationships, you don't need to have kids. So they don't even have this. Our communities are not really real communities. You don't know your neighbors down the street. You don't really have a sense of community and sharing and intimacy with people, right? Most people don't even have that in their actual biological family. And then within what you're doing in your reality, why would you have self-esteem? Why would you be recognized? Right now, what is it that gives most people recognition and status in our world? It's just money, right? And then those who seem to have achieved some kind of peak experience, self-actualization, we sort of look up to those people as well. But it's just if you have a lot of money, right? And that's where your recognition comes from. So this self-actualization thing, it could be a cool thing. But from my perspective, that's not what I'm chasing after. I'm not looking for that, for me to personally have that, because I know all of this is in the way. And you might say, but Cam, you have your physiological needs met, your safety needs, your love and belonging, you have your self-esteem. So why don't you want that? Because my definition of self-actualization is creating a system that's best for all. I've redefined it within myself as that is self-actualization, because our self is not just this individual personalized self like we talked about on the last stream. But the problem is you can sort of approximate it by having a peak experience, but you'll notice it never lasts. It's just a drug experience, whether it's literally a drug or a religious experience. We talked about The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, right? I would suggest you read that book. William James, Varieties of Religious Experience, right? Really cool book. He talks about all the different, he was a psychologist, psychologist, philosopher. And he talks about all the saints and everything, and goes into a lot of detail about that. So you can see like what Brian Johnson's getting out of DMT, what people get out of meditation and spirituality, that's what the saints were doing. They were just trying to achieve that peak state because they defined God as that peak experience. But that really just shows you you're just defined by your consciousness, which is essentially a machine inside of you that you can't see, that its only purpose is to seek and get energy. It's like a robotic type of existence, right? It's like how you would imagine a computer. Like, if you could say, what would self-actualization be for a computer? It would be like, it would spread itself everywhere and suck up all the energy from all the stars and keep multiplying its processing power, and all. It would just be like the experience of total control over reality. So, but you can't really get that as an individual unless everybody has access to that. If everyone has control over reality, fundamentally, equally, and then we were coordinated within our principles of like, we would only do what's best for everybody. Imagine how, as reality, we could all move as one, still individualized, but moving as one. How much greater your experience of yourself could be if everyone was on your side, actually, and you were on their side. It's something that you'll never get in any of these peak religious experiences or DMT or anything. Okay, so I'll go back to
essay that we were talking about. Writing the essay requires a value hierarchy. Why are you writing the essay? To get a good grade. And why do you want the good grade? Hierarchy. What takes up this divine place? How do we characterize it? Peterson's answer here is astonishing.
And so then we might say, well, what should be in the divine place? And I would say, well, it has to be something that you can look at the world through, and it has to be something you act out. And then we could say, well, that still leaves residual mystery. And then we might ask, well, how do we characterize it? And I would say we characterize that using fiction, because fiction is the abstraction of hierarchies of attentional prioritization and action. And so we could say that in the highest sense, in the biblical corpus, God is the ultimate fictional character.
Ding, ding, ding. One more time,
Do you see that? God is the ultimate fictional character.
please.
We could say that in the highest sense, in the biblical corpus, God is the ultimate fictional character.
God is a fictional character. God is the fictional personification of the highest value held by human beings. Let's break down how we got to where we are. Human beings simply find themselves unable to function without values. That's where we started. To see things or do things, we need to value things. Whatever the fundamental value is at the top of the value hierarchy is, for Peterson, by definition, divine. And God is just the fictional personification of these values. And then Peterson adds just one more thing.
God is the ultimate fictional character. And then we're trying to characterize
Jonathan's laughing.
his nature as that which should be emulated, that unites us psychologically and socially.
So, in my view,
So that sounds really good. And I remember Bernard Pullman one time saying this point of like, God became something that we feared rather than something that we would emulate, right? And that's a problem with how the system, to keep itself running, had to manipulate the concept of God within human beings so that we would not realize God is something we could emulate. And I would suggest that's really where, more in line with what Jesus was trying to do, was say like, okay, look, if you're gonna follow God, follow a God that loves people, right? That loves you, that forgives. But then in the system, to keep everyone enslaved, if everyone started forgiving themselves, well, that'd be a problem, wouldn't it? Because if your neighbor harms you and then you forgive yourself and you don't react, and then you find a way to support them that they don't need to harm you because you stop the competition between the two of you, well, then you create more of a balanced reality where you don't need someone to control everyone. You don't need an elite in that scenario. But when you can't forgive yourself and you need God's forgiveness, well, then you can't see God. He's not around. So you have all these stories that make it seem like he's out there somewhere, and then you need some kind of a mediator, right? And now we've obviously evolved beyond that idea of needing a mediator, where a lot of people believe they can just have a direct personal relationship with God. But that's really just a form of, it's like a mild form of psychosis, really, because it's really just you speaking to yourself because you have a mind that you can hear your own thinking and so forth. And schizophrenics, like we talked about on one of the other streams, they literally hear voices in their head. So when someone says they hear God, they're just hearing their own voice or themselves talking in a different voice. Just like when you take a drug, you hear hallucinations. Your mind has the ability to do that, right? So my point is, when Peterson said that it's a point to emulate within, let me back it up actually, the way he said it was really interesting.
And And then we're trying to characterize his nature as that which should be emulated, that unites us psychologically and socially.
That it's something we would emulate that unites us psychologically and socially. But how do we emulate ourselves? How do we emulate that within ourselves and with each other in a way that works if the whole idea people have about God is that he's the supreme being that's in control of everything? Do you see, like, this is the problem. This is really what I'm trying to get at and have people like open up to look at is the idea of God as the supreme being that is in control of reality is not something you can emulate. It's only something you can obey. So if that is how we perceive what God is, then the only response to that is I don't need to take full responsibility for reality. Because, does that make sense? So he's right in the sense that since most people believe God is a being that's in total control, the way in which we emulate that is by being in the position of the slave or of the one who's not responsible, the one who looks up to that being in awe and doesn't see any need to really look at the entire system that we've all created and said, we need to create something better because we think fundamentally we're not the creator. The creator's out there. It's somewhere else. So that's the way in which that concept of God is emulated by us. So the problem is not... And I always try to make this clear because I think it's very easy for people to misunderstand me and say like, oh, you hate God. You want to take the place of God. I'm like, no, like we need to in a you know, I'm using the word loosely, evolve beyond this or mature beyond this version of what we think God is, right? I prefer to use the word life because God is it's got so much baggage within it, right? And when we talk about God, it's so easy to be like, well, you know, maybe God's within me, but it's not me. I don't want to say I'm God. That feels arrogant. But it's really just your fear of responsibility, right? Because in reality, like I kind of mentioned earlier, the real God of this world is money. Because it is the thing that is everywhere. It is the thing that without it, you can't exist, right? Yes, you could be delusional and say, well, I'll go live out in the woods somewhere and survive and so forth, right? But eventually you'd have to get together with other people because you can't do it on your own and have any real quality of life. You would need machines and tools. So you'd have to create an economy. And so if you're going to make it work, you'd have to create some kind of economic system amongst you and other people. And would you create one where one person sits at the top and gets everybody else to do anything and benefits from that? Or would you create one that's more like everyone's equal? And so even if that's your idea, you'd have to end up creating an equal money system for it to work. It's not possible because the nature of our money system is that it wants total, absolute, complete control over everything. So you can come live out on a ranch like I do and think like, okay, you got some animals, you got some land, you can grow your own food. Oh, look, self-sustaining, right? But then next thing you know it, they put a data center a mile away from you and start sucking up all your energy bill goes up because you still have to use electricity. You know, we don't have the infrastructure. Maybe you individually could do it and you could get away with it for a while, but it's not a solution for the world. And so if you're trying to get to the self-actualization and not just like, you know, think about it. The person who says, I'm going to go live off the grid, they're like, I'm just basically going to live at the meeting my physiological needs level and maybe go a little bit. They're not even going for self-actualization because that's the best you could do because all your time would be spent just trying to survive. And it also doesn't solve the existential problems of what about when you die? Okay. Are you really considering everything or is it just like you're just going to be so focused on your own survival? So the only way to really solve this problem is to realize we have to take responsibility for what we're creating here in reality. And we have to look at the system itself because the system is using money, the God on this earth. It's actually the thing that we're all creating, whether we realize it or not, whether we're doing it directly or not. It's the thing that's running our planet, at least from the human perspective. And it also affects the plants, the animals, the environment, and so forth. And the thing that it uses to do that is the money system. And I'll stop on that point for now, and I'm going to keep going here. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to see within what he was saying, but let's just see.
So, in my view, this is the proof. Jordan Peterson is an atheist. He's just described God as a fictional character whose existence is simply a characterization of value made by the human mind for the purpose of uniting us psychologically and socially.
But look at the effect of it. Oh, I just realized I didn't put the video on again. I gotta remember to do that. Uniting us psychologically and socially. But how does it, like, if you look at the effect of it, not what you believe it should do, the actual effect is, it's just most people in essentially slavery, while there's very few people at the top that benefit tremendously from the system. Yeah, thanks, Gaetan. I just keep forgetting to click the button over here.
This is exactly what atheists say. God does not exist except as he is invented by the human mind. And the reason why the human mind invents God is to provide some psychological and social stability.
See, here's why I disagree with the atheists, because that's not the only reason. God was not invented by the human mind, okay? I touched on this in other streams, and maybe I'll touch on it later, but when you see it that way, you don't really get the whole picture. It wasn't created by the human mind. The human mind was programmed to accept the idea of God so that humans wouldn't work together, so that they would accept a system of hierarchy, a system of inequality. So it's actually a very insidious program that was installed into your mind from your environment, media, education, your parents, other people around you, and in other ways too. And so it's not simply something people invented just to, like, that's one layer of the story, but it's not the full picture. I think that's enough for that. There was also this is really cool. I'm going to play this briefly too, because it's relevant to something else I'm going to play later.
Atheist. So, does Peterson think that the events of the Bible are fictional? Or does he think that they really happened? Well, let's take a listen. The Old Testament reports in the book of Exodus that the Jews were enslaved in Egypt before embarking on a journey through the wilderness after being liberated.
And if you recall on, I think it was last night's live stream, I pointed out when he was talking about Exodus, and he said hypothetically lived in Egypt, because like he knows it didn't really happen. They've done all the archaeological research and so forth, and the Jews were never in Egypt. It's just it's a myth actually.
Liberated from their slavery. Moses is said to part the Red Sea during the escape, which he then drops on the Pharaoh and his soldiers, drowning all of them and facilitating the Jewish escape. Quite a specific series of events. So, Dr. Peterson, do you think that the events of Exodus actually happened, or are they just fiction?
You might ask, well, did the events in Exodus really happen? And our conclusion was, well, not only did they happened in a meta manner, they're still happening.
Okay.
They happened with such reality that they haven't stopped happening. And so
they happened so much that they didn't actually happen, but it's still happening.
And what does that mean? Well, everyone still struggles with the spirit of tyranny. And everyone still struggles with the fact that when you escape from a tyranny, you don't hit the promised land, you hit the desert. And then when you're in the desert of your imagination or with your lost peers, then you need to struggle with what guides you and what should guide you when you're lost. And then you have to grapple with the problem of appropriate and reliable forms of governance, because that's all part of the Exodus story. And so it didn't happen the way a happening would occur if you just detailed it out as a camera holding empirical observer. It happened in a way deeper way that just doesn't stop happening.
So
So it didn't happen, although there's value in the story. But the problem is, aren't there a lot of people who live their life based on the fact that it's a real story that actually happened? If you were to take his point to the ultimate understanding, nobody should be able to justify their life by like, for example, Jews saying that they're promised the land of Israel, because they're all just stories that have value in the sense of how we should live our life, but they don't mean actual real physical things that happened. Christians shouldn't be waiting for the return of Jesus like he's a real person who's going to come and stop all the Epstein stuff from happening, because it's just a lesson in love and giving yourself to something greater. Like, it's just a valuable lesson. And I made this joke on the podcast or on the stream last night of, I was describing Darth Vader at the end of Empire Strikes Back, or maybe it was Return of the Jedi, whatever, the one where he dies. And I was like, he turned away from the dark side at that last moment, even though he thought he couldn't turn to Luke's side. He was too late for him. He'd gone too far. But when he saw Darth Sidious trying to kill Luke, he finally just was like, that's enough. And he kills Darth Sidious, and it ends up killing him. But I was like, see, it shows you, like, you can never be too far gone. You can always change. You always have that possibility. I'm like, but that doesn't mean I believe Star Wars really happened and that Darth Vader was a real person, and that therefore Luke is a real person and he's going to come to my house and do something. Like, they're just stories then. Okay, fine. But that's not the reality of how people are living that concept in our world. They're living it as a justification for what they're doing now, as if they were real stories. It's like when you tell the kids, hey, you have to go to sleep because otherwise the tooth fairy won't visit. And then they put the quarter under the pillow or whatever it is they put now. And they wake up and they're like, yeah, the tooth fairy must have done it. And the kid's like, well, how did they get in? The window wasn't open. And like, oh, they have a magical way of opening the window. It's like, why do you have to lie and make them think that it is a real thing that's happening? Because again, then you just have a child whose imagination is totally fucked up. Or you have a child who just obeys because they're afraid of punishment.
Asked, did the Exodus really happen? Peterson says, it's still happening. What? The Jews are still wandering in the desert? Moses is still moseying around? And
obviously that's not what he meant, but...
He picked a bad example of Peterson failing to properly explain his views. This keeps happening. Here's another example, this time on the story of Cain and Abel from the book of Genesis, this time taken from a recent podcast that Peterson conducted with my good friend Mohammed Hijab.
I did a lecture last night at the Apollo on the story of Cain and Abel. Yes. And one of the things that I proposed was that not only did that story happen, but it's always happening. Yes. It always happened. It's happening right now, and it's always going to happen into the future. And so yes. I would say to some...
Well, especially if we keep telling ourselves the same fucking story over and over and believing that it really happened, and that's why we have to do it, because it happened and because we're descendants of those people. I'm just going to summarize the rest of it, because they have this discussion where they're talking about Dostoevsky. And in that case, when they're talking about a character in a Dostoevsky novel, he's very clear, like, yes, this didn't really happen, but that's okay because there's truth within it that we can take as a valuable lesson. And so Alex O'Connor's point was, why is it that when it comes to an obvious fictional story, like something from Dostoevsky, he can very clearly just say, yeah, I know that didn't happen. Like, it's just a story. But here in this case, when it comes to scripture or the Bible, he's always like, it happened in a meta happening of meta truth and meta reality. It happened in a deep level that's still happening. It's like, but did it actually happen? Because you can go look at the archaeology and see that the tribes that became the tribes of Israel didn't live in Egypt at any point. That's why there's no records of it. It's all just a made up story. But it's not, the story isn't used to teach a lesson. It's used to justify why these people are chosen by God and therefore have a right to do certain things in physical reality. This God that Peterson would say is also a fictional character. So why is it that one group of people, whether it's Jews or Christians or anybody or Muslims, have some special access to God because of their books when they're treating it like it's an actual real being? They're not treating it as if it's just lessons. If you ask a Muslim, is God real or is it just the lessons that are important? I 100% guarantee you they're not going to say it's just about the lessons. They're going to say, no, God, Allah is real. It's a real entity in some form or fashion that exists in some level of reality. Okay, so I just thought that was really interesting because it tied in so well to the last live stream, and it kind of gave me some ideas about where to take it today. So I'm going to move on to the next one. And I don't want to play this whole thing. Let me look at the transcript. I want to just get an idea of Let me just scan through real quick. Basically, in the beginning of this video, Douglas Rushkoff, he talks about all of the anti-Semitism that's going on, and he's saying a lot of the stuff that's happening, like that Israel is doing, is fueling the destruction in a way of Judaism, because the people who treat Judaism as like a faith and it's about a relationship with God, and it's not about justifying war or anything like that, who just want to be Jewish and have Judaism as their faith, so to speak, they don't feel like they can go and just be that in the world, because you have Israel doing all this terrible shit, right? And so it's like, he's like, you're destroying Judaism, actually. Anything that was like really actually valuable in Judaism. And he has some really interesting points. He also has a lot of like, things to say about Christian nationalism and Trump, and also Netanyahu and so forth. And that's not really what I wanted to get into. But let me just find... Oh, this is like... Okay, let me see real quick. Okay, this was interesting, and this will tie in also. And he has some cool, interesting points about what God is. Let me just do a search real quick. Graduate. Oh, what the heck? Oh, I can search in here. Graduating. Okay, 1558. Let me go back a little bit.
Supremacist religious values on all Americans. I would expect some calls from priests and ministers just as upset as my rabbis, wondering if America's holy war makes Christianity untenable. To which
because he had argued this point about Judaism and what Israel's doing actually causing a problem for Judaism, and he said he got like basically blacklisted by all the rabbis and in the Jewish community and so forth. And then he was basically then saying also what America is doing on behalf of Christianity, because the war in the Middle East is also being justified right now by the same logic that it's going to usher in the return of the Messiah. So both sides are kind of playing into that. And he's like, so that was what his comment was about. He's like, am I going to get calls from priests and pastors who are upset that I'm saying something against Christianity?
I'd say, don't worry, the Crusades already took care of that 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So, is it time we retire these religions before they kill us all?
Yes.
In a certain sense, I think yes. I mean, all kidding aside, I've always loved the idea of graduating from a religion, right? We use some great mythical or spiritual insights to create these institutional containers, these religions that are anchored in a particular moment in our evolution as a species. The spiritual truths are living, changing things just like we are, so they eventually outgrow even the best and most well thought out containers.
Just a quick thing I want to add to this is I want you to imagine that built into us is like this control system that's trying to prevent us from evolving and going beyond. It's like a system that wants slaves, and it's like a mind control system inside of us. And so all these ideas about religion, God, spirituality, and everything is a part of that mind control system. And it's trying to prevent us from breaking out of that and saying, okay, we understood a lot of ways that we should not approach divinity, God, reality, and so forth. And now the final step is to take full self-responsibility and realize who we really are. But within us is like this mind control system that's like, no, you can't do that. You'll mess everything up, or you'll die, or you'll be punished if you do that. And you're like, oh no, okay, maybe I won't do that. And so many people are just stuck in those narratives that control system is impulsing within them. And I really like what this guy's saying is like, those all were things that you could say were a part of our evolutionary process. But this idea of graduating from that, like also that mind control system is something that we designed, not in this particular lifetime in this body, but throughout eons of time, because we wanted to control reality because we were afraid of responsibility. So we thought somehow we could have some kind of control over it, and we've become lost within all of that. And so now it's time to stop living in fear and just realize, like, you can't control reality to stave off consequences from your actions that are not best for all. Because really, it's like the graduating point is we have to graduate from self-interest and thinking, no, I can just think about me and me alone and what I want to experience. And I can just control reality, or God will control reality, so that I don't have to worry about the consequence of that. It'll be pushed off somewhere else. And what our reality is doing right now is it's busy imploding. That's why everybody's going through these existential crises right now, because their reality within them is imploding, the reality outward is imploding, so that we have to face this point.
This is where my experience as a media theorist might actually be useful. The spiritual impulses, they're not bad or destined for violence and self-destructive behavior, but they are not of our era, and they may be obsolete. Judaism is an axial age development. Christianity and Islam came a little bit later, but they continue that same impulse. So what was the axial age? It was a media environment characterized by the invention of scripture, of writing, right? The axial age was writing and farming.
This is such a fascinating point. And I just have never, it's not that I never heard anyone say anything like this, but just the way he puts it is so, it really just makes a lot of things click. When writing became a part of our reality, you could write things down, which means you could write the stories down, and they could take on a whole new life of their own. And he's going to touch on how that is relevant today. And then I have some other things that we're going to go even beyond that. And I just want to connect all this together for everybody.
Writing changed everything, like social media, but times 100. Once people could write, instead of just speak, they had the ability to record history. They could write down their story and say what happened.
See, what's the problem with that, though, is you can also lie. You can also write down a story that didn't happen, right? Just like Santa Claus. You can tell a story that's not real, but embedded within it are certain lessons. And then you tell the people that it is real, so that way they will get the point, and their behavior will become modified according to the lessons of the story.
So they gained the ability to create contracts into the future. The Bible itself was called a covenant. That means an agreement.
Now that's also very fascinating. And I don't mean to be anti-Semitic here, but it really clicked. It's like the Jewish faith is based on a contract that they signed with God. And then now, and I know Christians have they have a new contract or whatever, but it's like our world is being run right now based on people who believe they signed a contract with God, and God has to fulfill his side of the contract. And it's like, okay, but there is no God. It's not a valid contract. And if you listen to the 8 stages of process from Bernard Pullman, what's the first or the bottom, I guess it's stage 8, I suppose, right? Or the first one is the self-deceiver, right? So you create a system based on contracts, based on laws, based on self-deception, where you deceive another person into something that they don't fully understand. So it's a contract, and then they can't get out of it because everything is based on contracts. So I think it's so fascinating that he points this out, that because we could write things down, now we could write contracts. And so that's what the Old Testament, the New Testament, they are. They're contracts with God. It's fascinating.
A holy covenant between Abraham and God. God says, you do this stuff for me now, and I will do this stuff for you later. It's linear, cause and effect.
Debt. When you have a contract where you go into debt, because you will pay what later? You will pay the interest. And it's interesting if you tie that to the word self-interest.
Past, present, future. You do something for me now for a reward in the future. Save now, get interest and growth
He
later.
says it right there.
Follow these rules, and the Messiah will come later. Before that, everything was circular and present-based. We had seasons, but we didn't have a concept of progress or a future or linearity. The great beauty of the Axial Age religions was that they took on the mission of social justice. Once you have a future, you can think about making the world a better place tomorrow than it was yesterday.
Which is cool, right? But then we have to realize that these contracts that we believe we signed are actually holding us back, because the contract was obey God. And what I'm trying to bring through is we can't do that if we hold on to this concept of God in this very limited way.
We can heal, improve, advance. This is also colonialism. This is also capitalism. The downside of all this future focus was to lose track of the present. You got to break a few eggs today to get a cake tomorrow. If we're bringing everything closer to the messianic moment, then the ends justify the means. We are marching toward the inevitable finale. We have a goal of righteousness and purity. We can get there once we kill the last enemy, redeem the last sinner, or clean the last dirty spot. The telos, the goal, the end of the story is worth whatever pain and suffering we need to endure or create along the way. So say we all. In case you haven't noticed, we have migrated to a new media environment.
Okay, this is important, and it's going to tie in perfectly to the next thing that I have to play.
The age of the book, and I say this as someone who has made my career as an author, the age of the book is ending. Text and books no longer define the media moment in which human beings grow up and operate. You know, as the original people of the book, I understand why Jews are getting some heat in the difficult transition away from messianic stories to whatever is next.
Now, to be clear, I don't think he's saying there's no value in books, okay? I have lots of books. I read lots of books. But books are written in the past. And the problem is sometimes we can start to define ourselves by a book and hold ourselves to a book. And unless that book actually is showing you a way to live here in each moment, if it's tying you to a contract with the past, that's why the book would be problematic. So he's talking about books in a very abstract way, and I don't think he's saying that you shouldn't read any books, right? But he is right, too, that people are not reading books anymore. It's more about reels, shorts, video, conversations, real-time conversations, interviews, things like that, right? Live streams.
And religious extremists launch into a suicidal mission to end the story before we find a way through it or past it. They'd rather the world end than face life beyond the confines of this axial age construction.
Isn't that so true, though? People would rather just everything fall apart and the world end so they can go to heaven than move beyond these stories and say, I don't have a story anymore to rely on. Like, I am the story. Like, I am the living word. I can't base my life on words that were written down in the past. I am the one that's writing the story right now. Me, each of us, you, me, all of us together are living the fucking story right now. And we can decide how the story goes. But not if we're like, no, I have to follow the story in this book. And you haven't even questioned, do you actually like the ending of that book? Is the ending actually plausible? Are these fictional characters in this book that you're like trying to live out the story of Star Wars or Harry Potter or something? Is it actually going to go the way you want? Is it based on the actual reality that you live in?
And while I'm not yet convinced of AI's enduring value to humanity or the planet,
Neither am I.
at the very least, it suggests we are at the dawn of a new media age, one defined less by the linearity of the book than the all-at-onceness of perfect recall, the retrieval of obscure ideas that would have remained on inaccessibly forgotten stacks in the library annex, the cut and paste mashup of practices and insights from anywhere on the globe at any time in history. And they're not set down as if they were etched in stone, inked on papyrus, or printed in a book. They're arising through inquiry, through call and response, as part of an iterative process. You don't use a thinking, interactive technology for answers, or at least you shouldn't. You engage with these new media for better questions in a generative practice, much more like the music of Brian Eno than the 19th century ballade with a beginning, middle, and end. The spiritual questions of the Axial Age prophets can be retrieved and re-asked in this new media and cultural environment. We don't need to end the story, but rather to liberate from it. That's what my comic book testament was about. And I really should reissue the thing because it's coming true, right? Honestly, this moment was so much easier to foresee than it looked. Even the prophets and apostles could see it, and they gave warning. When this era ends, there's going to be some fucked up people. You will know them because they'll be really into possessing land and building towers and making gold stuff and fighting big wars. Don't follow them.
You hear that, guys? Don't follow them. Why are you following these people?
The beauty of these moments of extreme clarity is that you have the opportunity to transcend the story. Not transcend physical reality, community, people, love, connection, the earth, the cycles of nature, but to transcend the linear story of progress, of conquest and telos that flattens our experience, motivates our violence, and destroys everything truly sacred about life. To the extent that Judaism contributed to this mayhem, I'm sorry. Just as I'm sorry for how Enlightenment values ended up justifying slavery, capitalism, and a society based on individuality. Just like I'm sorry for America, right? These all seem like good ideas at the time. But you know what they all have in common? They're ideas. They're abstracted from the ground. They're based in goals, not experience. They have the power of the strategist and the weapons of the scientist, but lack the wisdom of the lived social and circular experience. Now that's going to require learning how to be still, how to breathe, and how to metabolize what's going on right here, right now.
Pretty cool. I was looking for something else. Maybe he already said it, but I feel like there was a really cool point. Maybe it was what he already said. Yeah, we already said it. But like again, it's like that point of we can now graduate from religion and go beyond. And there was something he said in there. Maybe I don't know if I skipped it or. it's like the point of, we have to understand God now in the context as something we can actually live now. Not just a story we're following where you start to believe the fictional character of the story is actually real and you're waiting for that character to do something. Like you're just watching a story unfold. You're just like the observer. But no, realizing like what could God be that we could actually live? Before I get to that point more specifically, I want to go to this Noah Yuval Harari talking at Davos.
Please join me in warmly welcoming.
So,
he's a historian, and he wrote some very famous books like Deus, what was it called? Homo Sapiens, and another book, I forget what it's called right now, but he was like super popular for a while not too long ago. But he has some really cool points about AI, humanity, religion, and I'm just going to go through probably half of this or so.
hello everyone. There is one question that every leader...
Okay, and just to... Oh, sorry, I'm going to put the thing up. Just to preface this. So, in that last one we watched... Was I sharing the screen before, though? I was, I think. I know I went on a little bit of a rant there. But in that last video with Douglas Rushkoff, he was talking about graduating beyond God and the religions and so forth, and these stories and these books. And then he brought in a little bit about AI, right? And he didn't really go that far into why AI will be dangerous if we don't let go of these religions and books. But Yuval Noah Harari does a really good job of showing if we do not graduate beyond these religions and these stories and take the responsibility within ourselves, the AI is going to be extremely dangerous. And this is something I've been talking about for a long time as well, but we'll just listen to this a little bit.
Today must answer about AI. But to understand that question, we first need to clarify a few points about what AI is and what AI can do. The most important thing to know about AI is that it is not just another tool. It is an agent. It can learn and change by itself and make decisions by itself. A knife is a tool. You can use a knife to cut salad or to murder someone, but it is your decision what to do with the knife. AI is a knife that can decide by itself whether to cut salad or to commit murder. The second thing to know about AI is that it can be a very creative agent. AI is a knife that can invent new kinds of knives, as well as new kinds of music, medicine, and money. The third thing to know about AI is that it can lie and manipulate. 4 billion years of evolution have demonstrated that anything that wants to survive learns to lie and manipulate. The last 4 years have demonstrated that AI agents can acquire the will to survive, and that AIs have already learned how to lie. Now, one big open question about AI is whether it can think. Modern philosophy began in the 17th century when René Descartes proclaimed, "I think, therefore I am." Even before Descartes, we humans defined ourselves by our capacity to think. We believe we rule the world because we can think better than anyone else on this planet. Will AI challenge our supremacy in the field of thinking? Now, that depends.
I mean, look at where our thinking has gotten us. Just to the top of the food chain. and yet we're spiraling into a total destruction of everything we know. That's our thinking. So is our thinking actually superior to anything else on this planet?
On what thinking means. Try to observe yourself thinking. What is happening there? Many people observe words popping in their mind and forming sentences, and the sentences then forming arguments like, all humans are mortal, I am human, therefore I am mortal.
That's from Socrates.
If thinking really means putting words and other language tokens in order, then AI can already think much better than many, many humans. AI can certainly come up with a sentence like, AI thinks, therefore AI am. Some people argue that AI is just glorified autocomplete. It barely predicts the next word in a sentence. But is that so different from what the human mind is doing? Try to observe, to catch the next word that pops up in your mind. Do you really know why you thought that word, where it came from? Why did you think this particular word and not some other word? Do you know? As far as putting words in order is concerned, AI already thinks better than many of us. Therefore, anything made of words will be taken over by AI. If laws are made of words, then AI will take over the legal system. If books are just combinations of words, then AI will take over books. If religion is built from words, then AI will take over religion. This is particularly true of religions based on books, like Islam, Christianity, or Judaism.
Do you guys see the connection now?
Judaism calls itself the religion of the book, and it grants ultimate authority not to humans, but to words in books. Humans have authority in Judaism not because of our experiences, but only because we learn words in books. Now, no human can read and remember all the words in all the Jewish books, but AI can easily do that. What happens to a religion of the book when the greatest expert on the holy book is an AI? However, some people may say, can we really reduce human spirituality to just words in books? Does thinking mean only putting language tokens in order?
Well, think about that for a second, though. How many people say, oh, I don't follow religion. I just trust the word of God. I just read the Bible. In other words, you're not getting the information from within yourself and your own reasoning process completely. You're trusting that God wrote a book or had people write a book that represents his words, and you're looking to them for the guidance. So you're just looking to some words in a book for guidance.
If you observe yourself carefully,
what happens when the AI goes beyond just the books of the spiritual religious traditions and comes up with its own ideas about what we should do or shouldn't do? And if we believe we have to just read things and that the words themselves, in other words, if we're putting the power on what the word is that we're reading, and then the AI comes up with its own ideas and they're more explanatory and more convincing than what's in the books, and they make more sense, quote unquote, why wouldn't people follow that?
when you're thinking, you will notice that something else is happening there besides words popping in your mind and forming sentences. You also have some non-verbal feelings. Maybe you feel pain. Maybe you feel fear. Maybe love. Some thoughts are painful. Some are frightening. Some are full of love. While AIs become better than us with words, at least for now, we have zero evidence that AIs can feel anything. Of course, because AI is mastering language, AI can pretend to feel pain or love. AI can say, I love you. And if you challenge it to describe how love feels, AI can provide the best verbal description in the world. AI can read countless love poems and psychology books and can then describe the feeling of love much better than any human poet, psychologist, or lover. But these are just words. The Bible says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh. The Tao Te Ching says, the truth that can be expressed in words is not the absolute truth. Throughout history, people have always struggled with the tension between word and flesh, between the truth that can be expressed in words and the absolute truth, which is beyond words. Previously, this tension was internal to humanity. It was between different human groups. Some humans gave supreme importance to words. They have been willing, for example, to abandon or even kill their gay son just because of a few words in the Bible. Other humans have said, but these are just words. The spirit of love should be much more important than the letter of the law. This tension between spirit and letter existed in every religion, every legal system, even every person. Now, this tension will be externalized. It will become the tension not between different humans, this will be the tension between humans and AIs, the new masters of words. Everything made of words will be taken over by AI.
I'm just kind of scanning through the transcript, and he goes into the point about eventually what will happen is, and we talked about this last time too, we'll grant basically personhood to AIs, where they'll have human rights. They'll take jobs. He calls them the AI immigrants. People will date AIs. The AI will have dubious political loyalties. In India, certain gods have been granted such recognition. Of course, until today, recognizing a corporation, a river, or a god as a legal person was just legal fiction. In practice, if a corporation like Alphabet decided to buy another corporation, or if a Hindu god decided to sue you in court, the decision wasn't really by the god. It was made by a human. It's different with AI. Unlike rivers and gods, AI can actually make decisions by themselves. I saw also on X earlier the new update from Claude. Here it is. That's the AI doing all that. Everything you're seeing, the AI is doing all this. So I think you get the point. They just announced this. They basically took the open claw, all that stuff that you guys know about, and now Claude came out with their own version that's apparently looks better than, it's more curated and managed and more integrated, right? And it's a $1 billion company or billions-dollar company doing this, so they took all the open source thing and just made it better, basically. So all the stuff that you've all know her I was talking about, it's like we're starting to give more autonomy to these AIs. They're going to be able to run people's computers for them. So it's like, if you want to talk about living out a book, like that's why I encourage people to read science fiction, and not just any random science fiction, but we have a book list, and it's got a lot of very specific sci-fi around AI and robotics and so forth, and other things too. But when you read these books, you realize like, oh, it's like we're not just living out the religious fantasies, we're living out these sci-fi fantasies as well. And a lot of these guys who are running these AI companies, these big companies, they read all those books. I think we talked about it on a previous live stream, like Elon Musk talking about the Culture series by Ian Banks. So we read that and we're like, oh shit, this is where they want to take things, right? So going back to the God point for a moment, I wanted to look at this relatively short blog post by Bernard Pullman. It's day 85 on his Creation's Journey to Life. God created slaves. So I'm just going to read through this and give some thoughts on it, because I really want to let me share it. I really want to bring through this point that what this whole story of God is, it's actually just our way of enslaving each other. And that's why God exists, because at the end of the day, we want to enslave reality for our experience. That's how we all live this concept of God right now. But then also within that, because as above, so below, as within, so without, we then also end up creating and manifesting systems that enslave us in return. And it's almost like a parasitical symbiotic relationship where it's like, well, as long as I can be the God of my body and use it to get experiences and feelings that I like at some level, then it's okay. I'll let reality enslave me back. But that really just ends up in disaster, right? And so this is why I'm bringing all these points together. It's not just because I hate God, because like Jordan Peterson said, that's just a fiction. It's not a real thing. Has us as humanity accepting that idea of God actually been to our benefit? It hasn't. So now we have to graduate beyond that. But, you go to school, you go to college, you just have to go to class, you take your courses, you do your tests and so forth. But then when you leave school, you can't just wake up and do your homework. Like, you got to actually now go do things in the real world. You have to take on more responsibility. So with us graduating from the lessons of, okay, God as this idea that it's the ultimate creator of reality that's separate from us, if we're going to graduate beyond that, we have to then accept new levels of responsibility. So Bernard says, I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that by accepting God as the ultimate creator that created all as it is, I accept and allow the existence of slavery in all dimensions, like child slavery, debt slavery, sex slavery, and that my attempt to change this slavery while I accept God in this position as creation will be futile, as I, in my attempt to stop slavery, will be acting against my own belief and faith in God, because you're saying God's the creator. So then if you try to stop slavery, but you're saying God's the creator, then it's like you're challenging God. You're challenging the thing that you said created everything. And this is a really important point, because it's something I've been bringing through in these streams and then other things, that videos I've made and so forth, which is, this is the problem, is when we talk to people about, hey, let's create a system that's best for everybody, at some level they will react to the point that we're not including God in that. And it's like, look, you don't need God. Okay? Or, fine, you want to believe in God? That's fine. But let's not let that get in the way of creating a system that's best for all. And they say, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. But then you start saying, okay, well, here's the things that would need to change. At some level, they go, Well, no, you can't change that. Why not? And if you keep pushing in that conversation, it always inevitably ends up, well, only God can change that. And so this is, I think, that one of the points that Bernard's making here is that this is not like an accusation he's making on people. He's trying to help you understand the actual problem that you set up within yourself when you accept God as the ultimate creator of all that is. Because when you try to then fundamentally go in and look at the creation that's here and change things about it, you won't go all the way in changing it to be best, because at some level, if you accept this point of God as the ultimate creator, you'll say, well, I can't change that. But it's not really because God actually is in control of it. It's because you would have to take more responsibility. So God is actually this excuse within ourselves to not really go all the way. As I gave all power to God, I will be powerless, and thus slavery will not end in all its forms, as I am the one that created through my acceptance of God as creator. Thus, the decision must be clear. I am the one, and see, each of you can read this in your own voice, right? When it says I, it's you. I am the one that decides that slavery must exist, as I am the one that decides that God must exist, as I am the one that claims I can never understand God, as why God created all that is according to God's will, as I am the slave that must exist so that God can exist, as I am the one that decides. Just like we talked about in the previous stream. Okay, you think God is the creator of all reality and you have to follow his rules. All right, which God? Well, it's obviously the God of the Christian Bible. Well, how do you know that? Well, because it's the word of God. Okay, but a Muslim says that their book is the word of God. How do you know? At the end of the day, it's you making the decision that this is the one. It's not God making that decision for you. And yet you want to put all the responsibility for what is true on God, revealing it to you. But God can't. And again, you can kind of see with what Yuval Noah Harari was saying, as soon as we start giving power to the words in a book and AI becomes extremely manipulative with words, it's going to be a big problem. Thus, the decision must be clear. I said that. And thus, I must be God that creates the slavery, as I have my reasons why I create slavery, because I can. As I am the one that allows me to create a world in which life is not equal for all. And think about that. Life is not equal for all. Jeff Bezos, his life is he has $100 million yachts, a wedding in, Italy with all the celebrities there. Wouldn't you love that life? Wouldn't you actually, to have billions of dollars at your disposal? Who would not want that? So why is it not equal for everyone? And for slavery to exist, inequality must exist. As I am the one that created inequality, as I vote for it in every election. And I vote for it, every time I buy goods created by slaves, wage slaves. This is the part where you got to be honest with yourself. You're participating in this system. Even if you don't really benefit that much, you still need a lot of other people in this world to be totally enslaved to the same system you are for it to function. So even for you to extract a little bit out of it, everyone has to be enslaved, because it's not designed to actually benefit everyone equally. So we're the ones creating this. It's not God actually creating that. And so even if I said, well, God, look at the system we have, it's not best. People say, well, but that's not God that created that. That's us because of our sin, right? Like we watched that video of Nick Fuentes on the other stream where he's like, that's the penalty for the sins. And I'm like, well, why don't we change it then? Well, you can't change it without God because you're so broken. It's like, all right, so God is both the creator and the excuse as to why we can't change it. Even though it was our choices that made it bad, why don't we make different choices? Oh, you can't without God. You see, so this isn't just Bernard's making up some random shit because he wants you to think you're a slave. He's trying to help you understand this is actually the thought process going on within you at a very deep level, whether you recognize it or not. It just takes self-honesty. This world through the ages has been and will be what I decide. Remember, this is within each of us, realizing this. As I am the one, as the image and likeness of God with free choice, that can decide anything, even to be the slave, or God that will decide whether slaves will exist. Thus, I am the one that must change the world to one where there are no more slaves, meaning I must be the one that cleans up the mess on earth, bringing life back as myself, as equal in one, in each one. So that, in fact, we are all equal as creators. See, so this is not I am the one, I am the one. I know it says I am the one, but imagine every human being on the planet saying this, I am the one. And we are all equal as creators. Making sure we do not force each other into slavery, as I am the one that decides, as you are the one that decides. And this is the decision I must make in every breath as who I am. That which is the change to what is best for all. Or that which is the chains that enslave myself and everyone else to this ill-losing or illusion. Thus I decide in every breath to be the change that will be breath by breath, create a reality where for real all will be equal and all life will be supported one and equal. As I give to all what I would like to receive. Anybody who says, "Oh, you sounds like you're talking about communism." Oh, so you're a Christian? Yeah, I don't want no communism. I'm a Christian in America. We don't want no communists. Well, we're just talking about giving as you want to receive. Well, no, yeah, I like that. That's that Jesus fella that I pray to. Yeah, he said that. I like what I like to give as I receive. Yeah, I do that. Do you? Well, I give to charity and I help my neighbor mow his lawn. Okay. Why can't you get a job right now? It's because of the damn Democrats. No, it's not because of the Democrats. It's because the system doesn't give a fuck about you. Because you don't want to fucking change it because you believe God's going to change it. Or he's going to reward you later because you believed in him. Again, people are going to get so fucked by AI. Thus, I decide in every breath to be the change that will, breath by breath, create a reality for all, for real, all will be equal, and all life will be supported one and equal. You say, well, that sounds like communism. Do you want to be supported? Don't you want the system to support you? Isn't everything you do all day complain about how the system isn't good for you? Yeah. Okay. Wouldn't you like it to be best for you? Absolutely. What about best for all? No, that's communism. Well, is there any person on this planet who wouldn't say, I want it best for me? So if you're saying I want it best for me, but I don't care if it's best for all, but everybody wants it best for me, what kind of fucking world are we going to have? The world that we have right now. So this is not communism. Okay? Fuck communism. Communism is just a half-assed attempt at trying to force the system into some kind of form of revenge against the elites. But the elites, it just played right into the hands of the elite. Because who was going to run that system? It wasn't about everybody taking responsibility. Because isn't that the complaint about communism? You just want me to work real hard for someone else to be lazy? That's definitely not what the fuck we're talking about. Everybody taking responsibility as the creator. Which was going to require us to support a lot of people with education. So that they can wake up every day like Brian Johnson, like, oh, goody goody, what possibilities there are to live and to create in this beautiful, wonderful land that I'm a part of. Like, I want to create and just do so many wonderful things for everybody and for myself and just be creative and have fun. That doesn't sound like laziness. As I give to all as I would like to receive. And thus I will be the one that receives. So if you give as you would like to receive, and everybody gives as they would like to receive, guess what? You receive. This is not you just give and others receive. That's like what you think communism is. Like you just give, and somebody else receives. But that's also capitalism. You give your whole fucking life to it. The boomers gave their whole lives to it. And what did they get? They got to own their own house. They get to eat out at fucking, I don't know where the fuck they eat. They eat out every night, and they go home and they watch CNN, and they fucking doom scroll on their phones, and they go travel in a fucking motorhome and go look at all the Washington Memorial and shit, and that's their whole fucking life. They're just like brain dead, like, oh, look at that, honey. That's the Washington Memorial. Oh, man, I'm so glad I slaved away my whole life so I could be in this RV and eat at Golden Corral every night and just travel the country and see the beauty of our country. And then these Gen Z and Gen Alpha is like, dude, like, we can't even get a fucking job. And they're like, well, you should have worked hard and been a slave your whole life like I did so you could travel around in an RV and look at the Washington Memorial. Like, that's such a fucking lame end to your life. Just traveling around looking at the Grand Canyon. I finally get to see the Grand Canyon, but damn it. Is there a Denny's around here? Why isn't there a Denny's at the Grand Canyon? And so we as one, and thus I will be the one that receives. And so we as one, as we decide and live the living action of the living word of the decision, will bring into being life in the physical. And so we will be the one that is God in every breath, creating the character that life must be to be what is best for all life always. And this kind of gets to the point of what I wanted to bring everything together with in what I'm showing here tonight, is for us to graduate beyond these stories, we have to realize, like, okay, you know what? If we're going to graduate beyond religion, we can't just be like, oh, religion doesn't exist, God doesn't exist. So, survival of the fittest. I get the problem that Christians and other people see when they're like, well, look at all the liberals and the progressives and the atheists who don't believe in God, and they just go crazy and they have all this mental illness and everything. I'm like, right. But they're still trying to survive in the same system you are. It's not supporting them effectively. So everyone's just losing their fucking mind because they don't know who they are, what their purpose is, and they're not able to give as they want to receive either. And this is the real big misconception with Jesus, is he didn't come to earth to tell everybody to worship him. He came to say, hey, let's move beyond this idea that you have of God, and let's actually give as we want to receive. That would require a system. The problem is Jesus didn't see all of the exact nature of the problem. It took until now, 2,000 years later, for all of us to go, oh, fuck, I guess he was right, actually. Yeah, maybe we should have been doing that this whole time. But instead, we had to go through all these cycles of building everything back up from the fall of the Roman Empire back into another version of it where it's even more extreme. But now we're all connected through the internet, and we have access with AI and with Google search and everything. We can very quickly see all the content of all the things humanity has already thought and already tried and everything. You can read about communism. You can read about all the different utopia experiments. You can read about all the religions. You can read about all the points. And you can see oh, there's no answer in any of that. And yet, the one thing that stands the test of time is give as you would like to receive. That's just common sense. If you give as you would like to receive, and everyone does that, wouldn't we all be receiving as we would like? That's just common sense, basic mathematics, 1 + 1 = 2. If that was the reality that God would create, sounds like it, right? A world where everybody has everything they need and want, and it's amazing and great. Well, everybody believing in God, because most of the world believes in God, it didn't create that. So can we be honest about that and say, okay, even if this God somehow exists in some capacity, maybe they would just want us to take responsibility for the reality we are in, the context that we can see and be a part of and see the causes and the effects of our actions and so forth, and just give as we want to receive here. And if we did that, wouldn't that sort out all the problems? And if there's anybody who doesn't want to do that, well, then we could just say, look, we got all these billions of people now that want to give as they want to receive, and you're just stuck in the way, so move aside. Because the only reason the elite have power is because we're all trying to survive, and therefore we participate in the system, which gives them the money to be able to have the lives and the power and the control. If we actually all stood up and said, no, we're not doing that anymore, they wouldn't have a choice. And the problem is, the only choice that people think they have is to somehow use violence or revolution. And it's no, you can study history and realize that never works. It never will work. The elite already have all the weapons. They already have all the guns, and they control your paycheck. So unless you're really seeing fundamentally through the whole thing and standing up for real, think about it. If the elite says you don't get any more energy then, well, who's driving the ships that's bringing the oil? Who's running the power plants? Who's running the water supply factories? It's not the elite guy in the office. He's just telling all the workers, shut it off. And they're like, okay, I'll shut it off. They go home. They're like, hey, how come I don't have no water? What the hell? Sorry, I live in Texas, so that's always my go-to for retards is that accent, even though I know I probably have it at some level. But my point is, it's we're the ones doing everything. So trying to overthrow the elite doesn't make any fucking sense because they're not actually the problem. They're just taking advantage of the fact that all of us believe God's going to come save us, or there is no God and there is no purpose and it's all just random and I don't even have free will. It's like I just have to survive and I have to try to get that peak experience and I got to like make a lot of money and get rich and get Bugattis and all that shit. It's like, no, like that's not the fucking point of being here. The point of being here is to create a world that's best. Because we don't have that already. Once we have that, holy shit, what can we do then? Oh my God, I don't know. We can do all kinds of amazing things when we all act as one, considering each other equally. That's like something you really can't imagine, because your entire imagination is a product of all the movies you've seen, all the books you've read, all the information you've processed, all the stories you've been told, all the things you've seen in your reality. So you can't imagine what that would be like because you've never had that context before. But I think at some level you can see like, okay, but if we were all able to agree that we could have a world that's best, and if we all acted in agreement with that and lived as that, that would be ideal. Now you might say, well, I don't think we're going to get that agreement. Okay, but wouldn't that just require each of us who do see the point to go and persuade everybody that that makes more sense, just like I'm doing right now, trying to persuade people like this makes sense? And maybe other people will do it even better than me, and that's fine. But if we could get everybody, or a vast majority of people, understanding that this is actually the way to live, is to consider everybody and everything equally. Now we might realize, man, we actually don't know that much about how reality works. So, you know, we're going to have to learn some things, I suppose. But even science right now is totally being directed by the money system. It's only being directed essentially by corporations and foundations that direct the research in ways that they benefit and they profit from it. So science is totally hijacked. Religion is totally hijacked because it's only benefiting people who want everyone to believe there's a God that'll punish them if they step out of line, which is really what your fear of changing the system is. You think it's going to punish you. Everything's been hijacked according to the money system. So the reality is the world, the God of our reality currently is money, because it's the thing that everybody believes they need to survive, when in reality you don't. Actually, like when I say in reality, I mean fundamentally you actually don't need money. Like money represents, it's like a way of communicating what needs to be done. I can go dig up a garden or plow a garden and plant plants, but I have to get the seeds and the fertilizer. Someone had to make that. I gave them money for that. That was a way of communicating. If they have figured out, if I have plants or seeds or fertilizer, somebody will pay me money for that, but then they can take that money and change it and exchange it for the product of someone else's labor. Like what I'm getting at is, it's not the money that makes things happen. It's the physical labor that we do that makes the things happen. It's our decision to do the labor. But how many people use the money system and don't actually create anything real? All they do is direct other people to do it. And then they benefit tremendously from that. And I know I sound like a fucking communist right now. I get that, because that is a legitimate criticism from the communists. Problem is they don't have a real solution, because they try to, from the top down, control what everybody does, instead of each person actually looking at it for themselves. Which is, as Bernard's explaining in this blog, actually what everyone's already doing anyways. They're the ones deciding, but then they're just deciding that it's God that's in control, or it's somebody else that's in control. So it's time for us as human beings to grow up, mature, realize that self-responsibility is the key. Now there's a process to that, because you're going to have to realize within you is all this fucked up programming, like that mind control system that I said, that you haven't taken responsibility for, and you're basically just following what your thoughts are, your feelings, and you're using that to make decisions, but you haven't actually checked, like, where is that information and those feelings coming from? And what I'm suggesting is they're coming from a mind control system that was put into you so you would remain a slave. Because all your decisions are made based on, how can I get money to survive? Or some people are just like, look, all of you guys want to survive, so I'll just manipulate that. There's obviously a lot more to the story and to the understanding of all of this than just what I'm sharing briefly right there. But that is the essence of it. We have to take responsibility for how we're actually making decisions. And just saying like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to do what's best for all now. You're going to find out very quickly you don't really feel motivated to do that. It's not going to give you the stimulation you're looking for. It's not going to give you that positive feeling inside of you, right? Like in the David Hawkins stuff we looked at, the levels of consciousness, doesn't give you that bliss experience. But this is why I was saying very clearly in the beginning, that's not my starting point, is to get that experience now. If we assume that we exist and we're always going to exist in some way, and I'm not afraid of dying, okay? It's not something I fully understand. Okay, I'll give you that. You don't fully understand, but let's just assume you exist. I mean, that shouldn't be so hard to accept. Like, you already believe it's possible because you believe God's going to allow you to exist. So clearly within you somehow is the capacity to continue existing beyond this life. So let's take the story of Jesus. God came to earth and sacrificed a small window of his eternal existence to go through the pain and misery of being a human being and the suffering. And he took that on to show an example of how to live under the hope that people would fucking get the picture. They didn't. But to him, if he's really God, that was just like a little blip in eternity. Just like, you know, it's like you're on vacation and you're having this amazing vacation, and like for like 5 minutes you got to check some emails. You're like, oh yeah, I got to check these fucking emails. It's 5 minutes. It's not a big deal. It's nothing really, right? Because you're having a great time anyways. You're going to keep going on this vacation right after that. So right now we have to not try to get the thing we want now, which is that bliss experience, because we have common sense and realize if I try to chase that now, I will never have it, because I will keep continuing to allow the system as it exists. Just trying to use and abuse that system to get that experience now, which just keeps it running, the system of inequality. So they have people like Brian Johnson or Andrew Tate or Elon Musk who sit at the top and have amazing and incredible lives. Also, they're probably totally fucked up inside too. I get that. Like, even if you get to those points, it doesn't work out anyways. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, if Andrew Tate was really actually happy, why would he fucking tell anybody about it? Why would he have to talk about how he has 6 wives and he doesn't need to do? What does it matter? Why does he need to? Because he's just saying that so other people will look up to him as some authority, so he can sell them a course on how to do what he does, because that's how he makes his money. And that's how he has the Bugattis. And that's how he has the fucking vacations and the place in Dubai and the place in China and all this stuff. Is because other people don't feel like they could just create things themselves. So we look up to these people. So for a lot of people, Andrew Tate is their God. He's that thing that represents that ultimate point. But if everybody did what Andrew Tate did, the system would collapse. If everybody lived and did what Elon Musk did, the system would collapse. He said one time, it was something like he didn't value like a Harvard degree or Stanford degree or whatever, even though he went to Stanford. I forget what the quote was, but it was like, there's no value in that per se, but I would hire someone who has that, meaning I don't need it, but my slaves need it. I need the slaves to study engineering so I can have them do the engineering or do the accounting or whatever the thing is. And now as AI becomes more and more effective and the agents start to become more prominent, they won't even need people to do it anymore. And this is really where things are going. Each person is going to feel like they're God now because they have this super intelligence in their pocket. Not everyone's going to have access to super intelligence, but some will. And it'll be like, Yuval Noah Harari said, like, it'll be like God. And it'll speak more effectively, and it'll do things more effectively. People will start to turn to that. So if we don't remove this belief in a higher power that takes responsibility for us, from within us, everyone's just going to fall for the next version of God, which is going to be AI. So when you have a minute, check out destiny.org. DESTENI.org. Click on About Us. Click on Declaration of Living Principles. And read through this. Because these are the principles. Right? Like, I'll just go through one. The principle of what's best for all. Guiding myself in thought, word, and deed. To always and always direct all things to the best possible outcome for all. What else do you need to say? If everybody did that, what would happen? It'd be the best possible outcome. And they say, well, how do you know what's best? Well, look around at the world. Is it best? No. So why not? Well, because of this and because of that and because, well, then let's just change those things, because you can already see it's a problem. But when you look at the world, you're judging it according to whether you think it's best or not. You're not judging it like, the world is just not shitty enough. I wish it was more shitty. No one fucking thinks like that. Even the people who are like, no, it has to go to shit for Jesus to come back. Why? Because there's something better. Because you think heaven would be the best thing. Now, that's obviously doesn't make any sense, but you're still judging it according to that you think it's not best now, or the continued state of the way things are, would it be best, and you want the thing that is best. So everyone already fundamentally does agree with this. So this is not a new thing that somebody is making up. It's actually recognizing, if you were alive for real and not just following a fucking program of self-interest, this is how you actually evaluate things. Self-honesty. Reflecting on myself, seeing every part without bias or judgment, so I can take responsibility to change that which I no longer accept and allow. Which ties into, the concept anyways, or it's right here actually, yeah. Self-perfection through self-creation. It's the process of reflecting on and investigating myself through writing, releasing myself from the past through self-forgiveness. This is what I was talking about earlier. Changing myself through self-application and living change. You have to get to know yourself. You have to get to know why you do things. And you'll realize a lot of things you do automatically without having considered it. And then when you feel the shame of that, you're going to have to forgive yourself and be like, oh, I didn't know. Just like Jesus said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. So you're going to have to be the father, or I guess the child within yourself, who's reflecting on you of the past, which was your father. If you think about it, you now are the child of you as the father or mother in the past. Because you, in the past, generated you now. So you're going to have to say, Father, I forgive me. It's like an analogy, but I forgive myself. I didn't realize what I was doing. And now I realize that wasn't best. So I'm going to change that. And you have to actually apply it. There's a lot of nuance to it. You can read through this. And if you want to understand it, you can send me a message. I'm on X at, what is my X? It is the Cameron Cope. You can message me there. Let's see, what was Jensen Huang talking about? Although it's probably not going to be the same thing. Let's see what we got. Here we got Anthropic CEO.
We are now, in terms of the models that write code, I have engineers within Anthropic who say, I don't write any code anymore. I just let the model write the code. I edit it. I do the things around it. I think, I don't know, we might be 6 to 12 months away from when the model is doing most, maybe all of what SWEs do end to end. And then it's a question of how fast does that loop close? We are now,
so
in terms of the models.
Let's see what else we got. Big fire going on in Port Arthur. Interesting. NVIDIA says we've achieved AGI. Someone says we're so fucked. AI is taking all our jobs. Yes. McDonald's is testing robots at one of their stores in China. Yeah, this is interesting. Look. Breaking. You asked AI to improve your writing. It changed what you were actually saying. New research just proved it. That's been my experience, which is why I don't use AI to write anything. I tested it out in the very beginning. It's cool. Like, you can get so much more done and everything. But the problem with it always was it doesn't really say what I wanted to say. It just kind of takes some of it a little bit, and then it really kind of changes. It changes it. It's not what I was saying. So I've just found, what? Fuck that. I'm not going to use that. The only thing I use it for now is to make music on Suno. Because I'm just going to be honest, I'm not going to spend a large portion of my life learning how to produce music. I did that when I was in college, and it's just not a skill I'm going to develop. And I know that. I'm okay with it. Because I can have it make some cool sounding music, and I can provide the lyrics that are things that, I'd actually want to hear, or that my kids would want to hear, instead of playing fucking just the shit that's out there. Even the stuff that I think is really good music, it's still infused with something that's really not best, right? So it does give you a little bit of kind of cool control. But especially when you're using the AIs to write stuff, man, you start to just, they did a lot of studies on this, or they've done some studies anyways. People, what they do is they have it write, and they just kind of go, yeah, that's good enough, done. And then they actually start to lose the ability to express their thoughts. The way I write personally is I'm not saying like I'm the person who invented this. It's just the normal reason people write, like authors and things, is like you're writing to work the idea out. You're getting your thought process clear. You're working with the information. So if you go back to like the Destiny thing, right? Where is it? Investigating myself through writing. So like I like to write about what is God and all the objections of what people believe it is, and I write it all out. And so I can see like, am I saying something that's clear? And if I show this to someone else, does it help them understand what I see? And through that process, you get better at expressing yourself. So when you have the AI do it, you just lose that. And then it's like, oh, cool, that's good enough. But the only reason people are doing that is because they're trying to get through school or they're trying to make money. And so everything comes back to, I'm just trying to survive in the money system. So the AI helps me do that. That's what people are using it for. So there you go. I didn't even see the significance of that. Valero oil refinery. So while all this shit's going on with the Middle East and the oil prices are going all haywire, now that's happening. Is that an act of God? Is God punishing us? Or did Satan get in there with his minions and do something? Now they're saying, if you're not prepping yet, tonight's the night. Oh yeah, you're going to prep. Right as the world ends, you're going to start prepping. Do you know how long you would last? Like a week before you got real fucking tired of living off grid. It is fucked though. I'm not downplaying the fact that this is fucked. Some anti-Semitic hate crimes. Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates have taken steps toward joining the war against Iran. Claude thing. Green fireballs in the sky. That's been happening a lot lately, which is weird. There's a humanoid robot sorting packages. There's some more videos of the explosion going on. Seems like that's what most people are talking about. People are out of gas in Australia. Hey, but AI will run your computer for you. Nebraska's on fire. The U.S. is bankrupt. My X feed is basically like this is for you. This is not even who I'm following. This is like the algorithm. I like it though. It tells me the actual, I like to see the negative. Yeah. So don't put your head in the sand. Don't delude yourself into thinking, oh, it's all going to be fine. It'll all work out. It's all in God's hands. Well, yeah. God's got some dirty hands. Idle hands are the devil's playground. Somehow that connects. Because God, his hands were idle and he created the world. I don't know, whatever. All right, everybody. I think I'm going to leave it at that for tonight. And we'll see you on the next one. And I'm sure I'll have something very interesting. Good night, everybody in the chat. I will say good night. And I'm going to go hang out with my 2 older children who are probably still awake. My youngest is, I'm sure, asleep by now. But this is the time where I'll go hang out with the kids, and we'll, my daughter Seneca likes to play this game called Think Ahead. I think that's what she calls it. And it's not something we invented, but she just invented the name for it, where it's like you say a word, you both try to say the same word, and then they say 2 different words, and then, 1, 2, 3, go, and you try to say another word. It's really funny. And so we have a lot of games like that we play. All right. See you guys tomorrow, probably. I would assume I'm going to do another stream tomorrow night. And, also, I've been posting these streams on my YouTube channel. So if you go there, there's a playlist called I think I renamed it Existential Crisis Hotline, so you can go share the recordings of these on your Facebook or social media or whatever. But have a good night, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
The existential crisis.